Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. Simply pour a can in your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
Today we are joined by my good friend, fellow meat eater, and a guy that just loves to hunt turkeys, Janis Putelis. First, we're going to dive into a few questions from the listeners. Then we're going to dive into a conversation with Janis, going over decoying versus run and gun, his picture-perfect turkey hunting scenario, as well as his favorite 7 days to be out in the field during the spring. All right, we're going to jump right into the Q&A from social, email, and past episodes. The first question we have today is, how far can a turkey hear your call? Whether we look at like the scientific research versus like what our experience tells us out in the field, a lot of scientists say that they can hear at least a quarter mile. Some say in perfect conditions they can hear up to a half a mile. Janis, what would you say just from your experience hunting, getting responses? How does terrain matter? Calmness of the day, fog versus windy. Kind of give us your opinion, and then I'll kind of use some of my examples to decide how far they can hear.
I think the quick answer would be that quarter mile, half mile. Bad conditions versus great conditions. That sounds about right. But I do think that there's a lot of nuances that, I am constantly thinking about when I'm, calling two turkeys. If I don't know they're there, or if I haven't heard them. And certainly, probably even more than terrain, I'd say it's foliage.
Yeah.
Like the amount of foliage on the trees, the amount of trees in general that are between you and the turkey, because out west, we're mostly hunting coniferous forests, right? With just needles on the trees.
A little more open timber. Yep.
No real leaves. Now, obviously, thick evergreen could, I think, soak up some sound big time.
Yep.
But like this past spring, I was in Wisconsin and we were there pretty late in May, and it was way leafed out. Like when you were in the woods, you could barely see 50 yards, and I felt like there, like at best, we were hearing a gobble at like 300 yards.
They were pretty much right on top of you at the point you could hear them.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yep. Hey, now that you got some pet turkeys, you're gonna have to like walk farther from your house and like range find back and see if you can get an answer, and then we'll maybe get a better answer to this question.
Totally.
Okay, the second question. Early in the season, I hunt a particular area in the morning. The birds are gobbling their heads off, hit the ground and shut up. What would your strategy be? I'll take a crack at this and we'll see if you have anything to add. So it's very tough. I mean, hopefully you have some idea where these turkeys are going, where they're going, where their strutting zone is, where those hens want to be, where the hens want to feed. You can try to set up down there. One thing that I have an issue with is if I can watch a turkey for 5 days, pitch out of a tree, out of the roost, hit a spot, do the same thing 5 days in a row. And if I go sit in that spot on the 6th day, they're going to do something different. But I would just try to figure out where those birds are going. It sounds like, and we don't have all of the context of this question. Like maybe the person's scared to, chase gobbles. Maybe the person's scared to, go bump the bird, which is, completely normal. But maybe be a little more aggressive. The other thing is, one of the things I had heard, I believe Mike Chamberlain brought it up on a podcast I was on the Meat Eater a year ago, which I didn't realize. That turkey, they've got a pretty good memory. Like they knew where maybe they've heard you called from 3, 4, 5 hours ago. I'm not necessarily that patient to call from an area and then wait 3 to 5 hours, see if he loses his hens, maybe comes back. But those are some options. Either get aggressive, try to stay with that bird. And that's how I hunt, turkeys a lot is, chasing gobbles and then try to get just close enough to set up without them seeing me. And then usually you're back up trying to reset up. But those would be the two options. What would you do in that? I mean, we don't have all the context of this question, but.
Sure. But I've been in that position and, maybe you're hunting a place that you haven't been before. So you don't really know where they're going. You have an idea. I do feel like we often forget that like most turkeys, like unless they're getting bumped, they're probably not ranging that far.
Yep.
So yeah, being patient and hanging out in that zone. But I had heard it that turkeys will, when they lose their hens, come back to where they heard you call in the morning before. And I've had it pay off where you can never know if it was the same bird. But I know that one morning I called back and forth at a bird that was way too far off. I think it was on a neighboring property. And we did it for maybe 15, 20 minutes, and I could hear hens. I'm like, man, it ain't going to happen now. But for whatever reason, we're like, at 1 p.m., we're like, oh, let's swing by that same point and see what's going on. And we peeked out, and it was a big, like a high line cut, and we could look down it, and like 300 yards down this cut, there's a gobbler out strutting. Can't see any hens with him. We made a few calls, and that sucker was like about face and just coming.
On a beeline.
So,
yep. Yeah, good points. And I'm just never patient enough to see if they'll come back. I've either moved on or went and chased the bird that was still talking. But no, good advice. And then a question that Yanni brought from a listener or cousin. I can't remember what he said.
Yep, my cousin.
Does your decoy approach change during the course of a season? I only want to carry 2 decoys. Same with me. I usually carry a hen and a breeding Jake. My decoy approach is if I'm in thick foliage, thick vegetation, I usually don't set up a decoy or have time or want to risk, depending on how close we are to the bird. If we're cold calling, you could set up, birds in that, situation, even if you are in the dense, just to get the eyes off of you and maybe attract, pick up, on the turkey's sight to keep them off of you. But normally throughout the year, I'm really only setting up decoys if we got good visibility. If I'm across a field or across the meadow, got good visibility where a turkey can come out and see the decoys, then I'll set them up typically on the edge of the foliage. But I guess I wouldn't say, I don't typically change my decoy approach throughout the season. It's usually always a Jake behind a hen. Mm-hmm. How about you, Giannis?
I love using a strutter decoy just because I feel like it's fun, because that strutter really like entices a big gobbler to come in and strut for you, and you get to see the whole show and all that. But yeah, I've never like used a strutter and then thought, oh, I should have been using something else, or I might have spooked him off. But I'm with you. It seems like for run and gun, the decoys can almost get in the way more than they are helpful because you're constantly like setting up and then setting up for the decoy placement, right? And if you didn't have the decoy, you just set up so that, when the bird comes over the horizon to come check you out, you shoot him, right?
Yep.
And instead, you're kind of setting up so that he's going to have an opportunity to see the decoy. So, yeah, I do feel like for run and gun, sometimes it's just better to leave him behind. But there's no doubt in my mind that like on a open field setup, like a big spread, definitely can just be the extra little bit of realism that you need to bring in the bird.
For sure. I'm going to add on to that question. Do you feel, I mean, we've all seen, gobblers take off running across the field at a foam decoy, just a cheap decoy. Do you feel there's any difference? Are turkeys smart enough? The wiliest turkey, can you fool him like with a stuffer decoy, which is, somebody's taken the, a real turkey, taxidermied it up? Or do you think it matters that much would that ever, be the difference in calling a bird and having a stuffer decoy versus, your cheaper foam options?
Yes.
You think so?
100%.
Okay.
I feel like I've seen it in action where I'm just like, that bird could tell from 200 yards away that something was amiss. You know?
we've had birds coming in and like instantly, like all of a sudden lost interest, and you're like, what did it pick up? What wasn't right?
Mm-hmm.
I've got to hunt behind a few stuffer hens before, and it seems like the birds, could tell at times that it, was more real life.
Yeah,
real light.
I like to run those Dave Smith decoys.
Yep.
I'm sure you've probably used those too. And I don't know of others that are as realistic or more realistic. That being said, I've had birds turn away from those too.
Yep.
I feel like if it's like the same field, the same corner where in the last week, 5 out of the 7 mornings there's been a decoy set up and somebody even maybe shot a round off at one point, like it doesn't matter what you got going on. They're just like, no, not into it,
Yep. No, and then a lot of times, the quality of decoys, whether it's Dave Smith, if you're hunting, Kansas flatlands versus if you're in Eastern Washington and canyon country, like, and then the decisions run through your head, like, is it actually going to hurt to pull out these smashed up foam decoys that the paint's ripped off their heads, and some of that stuff always runs through you. And I don't know what the right answer is. Like, does it actually do more harm than good by throwing them out there?
What I'm excited to try this spring is I got a whole batch of those Montana decoys. They're doing some turkeys now, and it's like they're like spring loaded, so they still pop out 3D. But yeah, it's a very, like, compared to a Dave Smith, it's a very crude representation.
Yep.
But like when we hunt eastern Montana, we cover miles every day, and packing around those bigger Dave Smiths, man, you just gets old after a while.
Yeah, the big bag of decoys.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'll let you know next time we do this next spring how the just super packable, not as realistic looking ones do.
Perfect. Some of the questions that I had for Giannis, I think he spends maybe more time than anybody in the spring chasing turkeys, quite a bit. He's frowning at me across the table there. So he spends more time turkey hunting, I think, on any given spring than I do. So I've got some questions for him. And coincidentally, the very first question I have for him is on decoying. I wake up every morning ready to kind of do run and gun, after we sit at the roost tree, see how that pans out, which is almost always 100% in the turkey's favor versus, setting up decoys, figuring out you've got a good spot. Like, what do you wake up in the morning with the plan? Does it depend on, where the roost tree is, where they've been typically flying down? Like, do you go out there with a plan to decoy in the morning, or do you go out with a plan like to move, and then if decoying works that you'll set some up?
Oh boy. I mean, I would certainly say that I'm never going to pass up trying to have a bird roosted and trying to go for that move. Just because it like gets me more time to hunt, right? Yep. And it's like great to be sitting there in the dark and the bird fires off and you're like, sweet, he's like less than 70 yards away in the tree. Like, it's a fun, like, the anticipation's high, and even though we know that it doesn't work out probably more than half the time, like, it's fun to be in that position.
Yep.
And that's why I'm out there, is to have some fun,
So you're the guy out there at like 4 a.m. like crawling out to get your decoys kind of set up and in place, and then crawl back to your tree?
Oh, sure.
Yep.
Yeah, if I have a bird roosted.
Yeah.
If not, it's try to be on a high point in the dark and, listening, making some, crow calls or owl hoots at the right time of the morning, and hopefully hear one firing off somewhere. And then it's a sprint to get within range, you know. And
Yep.
but I'm definitely more cautious at that point. Like I'm not going to risk them seeing me, so I can get closer when I know that it's better. I think just to like let it happen. Maybe you call them in first thing. Maybe you don't. If you don't, at least they haven't seen you. They fade off. I have the opportunity to make
Yep.
another move.
Yep. I guess that brings up another question. How many days do you go out in the turkey woods with birds roosted, would you say? I mean, is it vital to your success, because when we hunted Northeast Washington growing up, you know, when I was in high school, just starting to turkey hunt, like we were in an area that fortunately for us on public ground somewhere, like we could drive around after dark and locate a bird. So we always started on a roosted bird, but I honestly have never killed one that we've had. I mean, we've maybe killed them later in the morning, but we've never killed them technically off the roost. What would you say your percentage is? Like, do you like ideally we all go into the morning, right? Having a bird roosted, knowing exactly where they are. But I mean,
I know some people that have quit doing it. I read some article recently. I can't remember who wrote it, but they said that they kind of quit doing the roosted bird thing and just went out there sort of with a little bit more of a blank slate. And when they'd hear a bird, they'd go and, you know, make their setup. But is the question, what's my like success percentage of like killing them off the roost?
yeah. I mean, what would you say? Like, are you killing, 10% of your birds off the roost, or are you killing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if I have a bird roosted, I think it might go up to 20%. 1 out of 5 birds that I know where they are, I could probably kill, I would think.
Gotcha. That's about right. Even though mine's way less. I don't know. I don't know if it's because I start to, do the soft tree yelps and you just want them to keep going, or like to recognize you. Maybe I'm just overdo it on the calls first thing in the morning, but it just never seems to work out for me.
I mean, I'll definitely run that. If I have a bird roosted and I feel like it's in a good spot to set out some decoys, I'll run that for sure.
Yeah.
Like, a hen and a strutter. It's hard for that strutter, the real strutter, to be up in a tree and see that going on down below him and not come over and have a confrontation.
Yeah. Last year you had some interesting things happen at your decoy setups. 1 coyote and then 3 cougars had come into your setups with decoys.
Well, I'm trying to think if we even had. I don't think I had. We were just calling when the lions came in. And actually, I don't think I had decoys set up for either of them.
Oh, they were just because the coyote came and got the bird you just shot, right?
Yeah. So I'm sure that in both instances, I'm not sure. I think that in both instances, the predators were there for the same reason I was. Like, they could hear gobbling, they could hear turkeys, they were sneaking around, they were sneaking in, and it just so happened that, they went right by me. Or in the coyote's case, like, he watched my bird start flopping, and it's still odd to me that was, a half a second after a gunshot went off, and he had not a care in the world.
Yeah, he didn't care about. He had a crippled bird there that he thought was an easy meal, and didn't care that a gun had literally just did that. Yeah, and then on the cougars, you just called those into your setup, right? They kind of snuck in.
Well, again, I don't know. Like, we were set up on the side of a pretty steep mountain, like in a full-on mountain, like a mountain that took us a solid 30, 40 minutes to climb up out of this creek bottom to get up to where these turkeys were. And we're kind of on like a draw on the side of this mountain. The turkeys were on one side. Later, we learned, once we kind of went up there to see where they were on this sort of a bench, land type, land feature. But the cougar, so we were calling to them back and forth, and the cougars basically came up this draw that was between us and the real turkeys.
Gotcha.
And, I'm sure they heard my calling, but they were like on a direct path to go to where those turkeys were,
Gotcha. Yeah.
And once they went by us, those turkeys quit gobbling. That was the end of that morning.
A lot of excitement at Giannis's setups and calling.
No, for sure. Last year was intense, and I can't believe that both times we had the presence of mind to whip out a camera and take a little video.
Perfect. We'll switch gears here a little bit. This one you get to be a little creative. Let's say you have a clean canvas, 100 acres, and you can paint your perfect turkey hunting setting. Give us a little bit of what that would look like as far as streams, vegetation, ag, trees, ridges. Like, what would your ideal turkey hunting spot look like?
And you're asking me ideal as in just what I like to hunt, or is more of like what I feel like is the best landscape to kill a turkey
Yeah,
in?
kill. You can pose it any way you want. Hunt and kill, I guess. Like if that was your 100 acres to hunt for the rest of your life, you had it forever. Like what would it consist of? Would it have a barn in the back corner of the,
Sure,
the just picture perfect turkey stuff. Like what would that look like?
Well, I tell you, man, I really, it's a tough question because I enjoy like the Ponderosa kind of river breaks country of the West that I get to hunt. That it's very savanna-like, where you have big ponderosas, but you can see sometimes hundreds of yards, through the understory. And it's just like beautiful parkland to walk through. It's rolling hills. You're not trudging up and down, 2,000-foot elevation, gains and drops like you are elk hunting. Yeah, it's just beautiful. But I also really enjoy hunting turkeys in the Midwest, with on hardwood oak ridges, with just beautiful green, super green spring colors going off. And if you get lucky, you see something like the dogwoods blooming. So I would always prefer to hunt them like without any sort of agriculture. Just because I feel like you end up, or like, not that the field edge hunt is bad, but it just seems to be a little bit more predictable.
Yep.
And a lot of the reason I love hunting turkeys is because they are unpredictable and they're constantly like humbling me, and what they're doing. So I feel like just hunting them in the woods, it's a little more challenging. And I would say like, the defining feature between both of those landscapes that I would like to have to help me kill them would be some sort of rolls in the terrain, something that makes like horizon edges that are, that I can set up behind, that I can use to hide, that I can use to move. Because it's no different I feel like than from an elk. Like if you're calling and that elk can see 100 yards to where you're calling from and he doesn't see another elk there, they get suspicious.
Yeah, throw up the red flag at that point.
And the turkey's the same way. And so if you have to force the animal to come around a corner or come over a horizon to come and check you out, or come through something thick to, come check you out, I use that as my sort of like, if you want to see me, you're going to come through here. And if you come through here, hopefully I get a shot, And so I like to have some sort of, I don't want to go hunt turkeys on the plains of Kansas, although I've done it and it was fun, but I remember it being extremely difficult for that reason.
Yep. Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, we have a kind of what I would label as my picture perfect spot in Northeast Washington. Of course, it's a piece of private, but you would drive by, it has, one major ag field out in the middle, and then it goes up into mountainous country, but then the draws would have like, semi parks and meadows in the bottoms of those, and it kind of all fed to this ag. I just would love to go kill them back up in those parks and meadows, but it was just kind of like that ideal spot where they had big roost trees along the creek. They had their water they needed there. They had a bunch of brush around it for their nesting spots. So it was just like the perfect mix of everything. Like the hens didn't need to leave that piece, later, to go find nesting, tons of food, tons of elevation for us to hear birds off of. And so it's kind of that like mountain mixed into ag, but then have, the creek and the brush and stuff it's kind of always been like that ideal setup. And it seems like now, of course, anytime I'm anywhere, if we're in a Kansas spot that kind of looks like it, it reminds me of like, it's just, you feel like you're in turkeys, and, it's kind of my ideal setup, but it's on the ground. It exists. We just don't have permission to hunt the private
anymore.
No, never did. We hunt the fringes, but I mean, you could like, you do your morning hunt, maybe go back, for lunch or whatnot, and there's, birds everywhere on every edge of that place. And it's just like, dang, it's like, it was just perfect.
Yeah. Well, that's the cool thing about turkeys, man. They're so adaptable, and they live, I think, now in every state in the country, right?
Yep.
Dang near. I know that the Alaska population is like kind of like, maybe a myth, maybe not, but they're there sometimes, But yeah, they live everywhere, so you can find, like, in your mind, perfect turkey habitat anywhere you go.
Yep. All right. Aggressive setups versus being patient, and coming as a diehard elk guy, like I've just kind of taken what I knew about elk and transferred it to turkey hunting. So we keep a very aggressive setup. The question I want to ask: how long do you wait before moving? Like, if let's say you're in a decent spot, a hardwood bottom. You hear a turkey 300 or 400 yards away. You guys play the game for a little bit, let's say 5 to 10 minutes. The bird answers, and it seems like he either moved off or went silent. Like, how patient is Janis Putelis against the turkey tree? Or are you going to go move 200 yards ahead and see if you can strike him back up? Like, where the heck are you at?
Yeah, boy, it depends on the day and the terrain big time. Because again, a lot of times in the open country of the West, you might be able to see them, and kind of see what their mood is, or if they're tending to head one way or another, which makes it great for us because you can always sort of fall back on like a bushwhack strategy, which is just like, okay, they're heading generally east. Let's jump on the north side of this ridge and boogie 500 yards, get in front of them, because I can tell you that you're always going to be more successful calling a turkey the direction that he's already going or she's already going than trying to turn them or pull them back, the way they don't want to go.
Yep.
This past spring when we were in Wisconsin, I was just telling you about when it was super leafed out. We had a great example of this where we snuck in to like 200-300 yards of these turkeys, like working this wide open chopped cornfield, and it was a hilly cornfield, so you could see all the way up to the horizon. It was maybe 500 yards away, and these turkeys, there was, I don't know, 3 or 4 gobblers working back and forth. And we got the decoys set up without them seeing us. We got behind our decoys, and the chopped cornfield was on the neighbors, so we were like limited as to like how much we could actually chase them, and we set up, worked them, thought we had 1 or 2 pretty fired up. They kind of came down the hill across the chopped cornfield, but eventually it went silent and we couldn't see any more birds. And we had seen a couple fade away, but I kept telling my buddy Miller that I was hunting with, I'm like, man, like we saw 4 gobblers total. We know 2 faded away, but the other 2, we don't know where they are. Like, let's give it some time. Let's wait. And because for sure they had seen the decoys. For sure they had heard us. They had been answering us. And it probably seemed like a lot longer than it was. I'm guessing it was 5 to 10 minutes. But all of a sudden, like, we're looking at, our decoy, and right next to it, here comes a redhead. I mean, he was in range, and it was just like the roll of the terrain or whatever. He was able to, kind of sneak in on us, but we very easily could have been standing there and been, with our heads down, like thinking about the next plan, and just those 5 or 10 minutes made it pay off. So I'd like to think that, I'll at least, when I'm like in a rush, I'll be like, okay, dude, just give it 5
more,
give it 10.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like that turkey's, like I said, most of them just really aren't covering that much country in a day. So they're not going that far.
Yeah.
And so give it 10 minutes. If he's walking directly away from you, maybe he's going to be 50 yards farther than he was earlier, right? They're just slowly feeding their way around.
Yeah. One thing I noticed this year on the bird I killed in Kansas, we think he was like a 2-year-old, maybe a young 3, but there were some big eastern birds on that property, like a lot bigger than he was.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to watch him, similar to that story, come corner to corner across the cut cornfield that was just, left. And he approached so slowly, like made up 0 ground in like 15 minutes to come across that field, maybe 200 yards. And, we were hunting with Chris Parrish, and he's like, that bird had been beat up. He was super nervous with the situation, kind of as he approached that hen decoy all by itself, like just he was waiting to almost be ambushed, or he's waiting to, approach with extreme caution. And so, but it just lets you kind of see like, well, if that would have been where I thought that bird was 400 yards away and he had to cover that, like it could have been 30 to 45 minutes
easily.
Because I get super impatient. Well, the damn thing hasn't answered me. Obviously, he left. Let's walk towards him. And then, you're 200 yards away, you meet the turkey, and it's just an explosion of feathers and, him bombing out of there. And it's like, he was still there. He just, for some reason or another, had crossed the line in the dirt that said, all right, I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm close enough. Maybe he's waiting for that hen to come see him. Like, I don't know what the thing is, but it seems like more times than not, when I get impatient, you end up, busting that bird as you get up and move in his direction.
Yeah. Totally.
So.
I think it happens with elk too. We had one last year that I think we already caught him, or maybe we had set up. He came feeding out of the timber, and there's this giant oak tree in the middle of a I think it was corn again. Maybe it was like half corn, half beans. Anyways, he comes out, goes around this big old oak tree, starts coming towards me, and then veers off, just keeps on feeding, goes all the way around this giant oak tree. I mean, it took him 15, 20 minutes, and he's just feeding, and he'd already made like a motion to come towards me, but he decided to go all the way around this oak tree again, and then the second time around, he came, and then he came to us. But it wasn't like the dominant bird that's just coming running where you can just see his, breast shaking as he's running towards you. It was just like, I'm going to feed slowly. And then when he finally got to within that, range, when he's looking at my Jake decoy going like, all right, I know I can beat you up. That was the first time he came into strut, and he was already within range,
We've all seen plenty of gadgets and fads come and go, but here's one product that stood the test of time. Seafoam Motor Treatment. Lots of hunters and anglers know that Seafoam helps engines run better and last longer. It's really simple. When you pour it in your gas tank, Seafoam cleans harmful fuel deposits that cause engine problems. I'm talking common stuff like hard starts, rough engine performance, or lost fuel economy. Seafoam is an easy way to prevent or overcome these problems. Just pour a can in your gas tank and let it clean your fuel system. You probably know someone who has used a can of Seafoam to get their truck or boat going again. People everywhere rely on Seafoam to keep their trucks, boats, and small engines running the way that they should the entire season. Help your engine run better and last longer. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
So let's dive a little bit into how Janis Putelis calls turkeys, like what his strategy is, what your technique is. There's clucks, purrs, cackles, cutting, yelping. Is there and I'm sure most of us have a go-to, like, let's say you're set up in a good spot, everything's working, the bird's 150 yards away. Like, what's your calling, strategy? I know there's a lot of other factors, but let's just say on, your general calling setup, like, how are you going to speak to the bird? What call are you going to use? Is it going to be on a pot call, a box, a mouth diaphragm? Like, can you explain that situation, kind of what your go-to is?
Go-to? Jeez. It used to be a diaphragm. Like, I always felt like if you're going to make me just have one call, it'd be a diaphragm. And just because that was what I was most comfortable with. And it was probably because I'd gotten good with an elk diaphragm. And so it was pretty easy to, when I switched over. Now I also feel like I can probably make more nuanced, softer stuff with a pot. And it just depends. Like, probably for the nuanced, softer stuff, slate. And then if I want to get a little bit louder, I'll go crystal, to try to fire one up. But if the bird's already there and like I feel like I'm working him, I'm going to start with less. and then work towards more. And that's something I've learned with my pet turkeys. And it might change as we come into the first breeding season here soon. But like, rarely do I hear those turkeys. And I've got 1 Jake and 2 hens right now. Rarely do they make more than like 3 to 4 notes.
Just a real.
Rarely. It's that's what you hear
Yep.
95% of the time out of my turkeys. And you hear just the little putts and purrs, but they're not sitting there
Yeah. Like-
for 7 or
Like
8
99%
or
of
15
the
notes.
hunters out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, everybody's seen now a YouTube video where there's some hen that, does 72,
Yeah.
yelps in a row. But I would start with less and just think that, again, just like 95% of the time, my turkeys are not doing a lot. It's probably similar in the woods. 5% of the time, there's probably some hen just going bonkers.
Yep.
You can always escalate to that and backing up to if the bird wasn't there and if I'm just trying to find one, I might do a, 10 notes real loud with some cutting and stuff just to get an answer. But then I'd probably immediately back it off, and try to just work into it. So, it probably just depends on whether if I have a diaphragm in my mouth or if I want to pull out the pot call, how much time I have, to set up and whatever. But starting just really micro, couple 3 yelps, maybe a couple clucks here and there.
And then you just judge kind of his response. Does he gobble? Does he, are you, or are you just doing it regardless? And then you got to, figure out how he responded and then kind of make your next play. Like, all right, he liked that. We'll get it,
Because a lot of times I feel like even though, you think that you're getting him all fired up and he's gobbling at every call, I have a feeling that bird, you could probably quit calling and he's going to keep coming and keep gobbling because he's fired up, right? Like you don't necessarily have to get him all hot and bothered. And I'm sure that some people are good enough to do that. I don't know if I am. It seems like most of the time, like he wants to come to you anyways. I don't know if he needs like to hear you making more yelps to be like, okay, for sure I'm coming now. Like he's like, okay, there's a hen there. I'm coming. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where it's nice to be able to watch them because, if they kind of stop and then you call again and they start to move again, it's like, all right, he needs some prompting to keep moving versus, like you said, if you make that first 3 or 4 note yelp, he responds to it. He might be on his way regardless of what you do from there on out. I'm with you. I used to be a diaphragm junkie, because it's kind of a carryover from elk calling. But you get into turkey calling, and I just love the sound that you get out of a pot. It seems like the birds are super responsive. My one big conundrum, though, is, all right, you're doing the calling, you're running a pot call, and the bird gets close or he's visible, and you're not necessarily tucked in right. Like, all right, now I've got to. Is me switching to a mouth diaphragm here at the end going to mess it up? Is he going to notice a difference? Like, that's always I wish you could just, have a caller 10 yards back using the pot call. Sure. And then that way you don't have to, the shooter can do what he needs to do, or I could do. But yeah. Hey, on top, you mentioned slate. To bring this up, I just found out this morning before this podcast, there is evidently a slate issue across the country.
Shortage.
Uh-oh. Like, I'm having to decide now what I want for slate in middle of 2023, and we haven't even sold our 2022 calls yet. And so, and I'm lucky that Phelps Game Calls was a big enough customer last year, thankful to the Meat Eater X Phelps line and its popularity, that we made like we were like the bottom cut of being on the list of even being able to buy slate from the one manufacturer. So it's getting crazy out there. It's not like glass or crystal or something that's like more, man-made, I guess. It's it being naturally produced stone. Like there's only going to be X amount. And if you're not part of do you know if like demand has increased like in some other production that happens in the world? I just think that there was, it sounds like it's been bad business for the last couple of years. So they're raising the price up, and they basically said like, well, basically there was anybody else besides this group of people that have the slate could sell to you. But other than that, like we're no longer distributing slate to the smaller companies. I'm like, well, that puts us in a weird spot because, we're here probably, early March of 22, and I'm making the decision like what our forecasting and everything's going to be for. But it's such a good material for a turkey call. You want to be on that list, or interesting decisions I get to make.
Get a bunch is my advice.
Yeah. I think we'll definitely probably buy more than we need just to make sure we have some on hand.
Yeah.
Just a little side fact on the slate issue in the United States right now. We're going to drop down to the question that I had for you is, and this is very dependent. I mean, if you're hunting Osceolas, you're obviously going to be in, March, early April, or if you're hunting Washington way up north, it's going to be different. Let's take like your typical Midwest state. What's your favorite 7 days? I mean, you're hunting from April, I think last year, would you hunt from early in April to, towards the end of May even?
Oh yeah.
You were kind of, scattered out like
very late
with
in May.
with a ton of experience covering probably 2 different months. Like if you could pick a 7-day period, what would be your ideal time to be out there chasing turkeys?
Man, just top of my head, I'd probably say like the 5th through the 7th or 5th through the 12th of May.
Of May.
Yeah.
Elaborate a little bit. I'm sure your reasons are the same for mine, because my days are very similar. In Washington, I would like to be there, that first weekend in May, and then hunt that next week. If I had to pick a week time there.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let you give your answers why that's such a great time. I'm fully on board, and all of you listeners, don't hunt the same time as me and Yanni. Are recommending you guys still fill up opening weekend, get all excited, get it out of your system. Don't come back in May, but we're going to do our best to explain why we feel that first part of May is pretty good.
Honestly, before we get into like the turkey, tactics and behavior and whatever, a lot of it for me has to do with just the weather. I mean, you can kill birds all April long, but especially hunting out west and even hunting in the Midwest, man, like hunting turkeys like in a light snowstorm. Yeah, it's still fun. I like hunting turkeys in any weather, but is it as good as when it's like a bluebird 65 spring day and the birds are all going off and it's all green and pretty out there? No, It ain't the same deal.
I mean, turkey hunting in the rain is only better than work. Like there's nothing else below it. Like I'd rather be turkey hunting in the rain, but it just sucks sitting under a tree, getting soaked. It's still pretty cold that time of year.
Yeah, freezing.
I don't like it.
Freezing. No, I've been so cold sitting in exactly that, man. Like we had a bird, he only gobbled 2-3 times. I was with my wife and he came down. We kind of lost him, but he popped over a little ridge and I saw a hen with him, but they were just feeding our way. But they were like just feeding because it was just like cold and sopping wet. Like he wasn't strutting. They were just feeding. And I'm like, you know what? Kind of looks like they're coming our way. Let's just wait it out. And we were there for a solid hour. And sure enough, eventually here they come within range. And we killed the tom. But like, it's just like,
Yeah, same thing with my wife's first bird. A big rainstorm. Middle of April, all the creeks and everything was elevated. Small streams that weren't supposed to be there were there, and her bird just comes in soaking wet. They're not near as pretty. It's just I was stoked she killed her first bird, but man, the experience isn't the same if it would have been 65 and sunny. Want to dive into the biology and maybe why, or part of the biology
for sure.
on why that might that.
Well, I think what we're both probably hoping for is that. And now, after listening to Mike Chamberlain, there's even more reason to do this. But what we're hoping for is that most of the breeding has happened. And the big flocks have broken up. And you're hoping to catch that time period when, like, all of a sudden a majority of the hens are sitting. But there's still plenty of hens out there that aren't finished breeding.
Yep.
And so all of a sudden the numbers skew where, every gobbler used to have, I don't know, whatever it is, the ratio, 5 to 1, 6 to 1. And now maybe it drops down to 2 to 1 or maybe 1 to 1. And those gobblers they're like still very primed up. They're like still ready to breed. They're talking a lot. And if you just can catch that right, that right time period, man, it can just be like, you're just going to fool them like no other time and fool them easily.
Yeah. And it just, the competition's a lot less if you're dealing with having to beat 1 or 2 hens versus
Yeah.
a flock of 5 or 6. And
Mhm.
I was told by an old timer, and whether it's true or not, is those older hens are typically bred first.
Mm.
They start to fill their clutch of eggs up. They're fully nesting. They're no longer being bred, and those are the hens that kind of control those situations. Like they're more likely to tell that tom, we're going this way away from this hen that's calling to you, which is
Right.
us, versus these younger hens no longer have control over him. So if you're calling to him, yeah, he might have a hen or two, but he's like, I'm just gonna go this way because the boss hen is no longer there, like telling him what he's gonna do or where he's gonna go,
Mhm.
which is kind of has always stuck with me. Whether it's right or wrong, I think about it that way. That early May, and then that's the thing. Even in early, mid-April when our seasons open up, you'd always still get those birds to gobble midday, which you always thought you had a better chance.
Mhm.
You just seem to get more of them, in May. Like you'll get more of that midday gobbling because, they're still fired up. They're still wanting to find a hen that want them to be bred. But it just seems like it opens up that midday gobbling opportunity. You may hear more of them midday, which, seems to result in a better kill odds for us as a turkey hunter.
I tell you what, talking about it is getting me excited to go turkey
you ready?
hunting. Yeah.
I
was telling my kids it was time to start talking about turkey hunting. They're like, oh, but it's months away. I said, yeah, you got to get primed up. I told them, I said, all right. I said, I won't talk about it until February. They're like, well, February's in 2 weeks. I'm like, I know.
That's all I'm giving you.
That's all I'm giving
What do you have on the docket this year for turkey hunts?
Pretty exciting in full spring. I'm trying to think where we start. I want to say that the first hunt is California, where I'm hunting with my friend Rue Mapp. So we're gonna hunt Rios out there, like near Napa Valley, which I've hunted before, and I came away with one of the worst cases of poison oak I've ever had.
Oh, no.
So I've got that top of mind to hopefully do better. I don't know what I'm gonna do, if I'm just gonna bring like 5 changes of clothes and never put on the same clothes, or just do a lot of scrubbing with hardcore soap. But and then let me see, we're doing the TRCP turkey hunt. Steve and I are doing that in Michigan, and that's in April too. I've got my annual family turkey hunt in Montana, where we go and camp usually for 4 or 5
awesome.
days. I feel like I'm missing something, but I'll probably get just some other, days here and there in Montana.
So pretty full slate for
It'll be
turkey
good.
hunting.
Oh, I almost forgot. Steve and I are going to Central America for the Oscillated,
There you go.
which is kind of a turkey, not really a turkey, kind of a turkey. It looks like just as much as like a peacock as it does a
Yeah.
turkey.
They don't speak turkey.
They don't. And we're not going to be doing any sneak. But this is where like the skill of getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and slipping through the woods and getting under his tree is going to come in handy, because I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that to kill one, you have 2 options. Sit on a field that's got ag in it and wait for him to walk by, which I'm not that interested in. Or slip through the woods in the dark and the coming dawn, and when he does, they make some sort of noise
Yep.
that will give away their location, and slip in there. And then once you can see them, you shoot them off the roost,
Out of the roost.
which I think is what Steve and I are gunning for to go
Gotcha.
do.
That brings up another topic for a whole nother podcast on, it's probably acceptable to shoot them out of the roost down, that type of bird down there versus, up in North America. It's kind of like, you don't want to do it that way.
No, I think some states it's even illegal.
Yeah. So, closing this up, Giannis, if you had one tip or tactic to give to a turkey hunter out there that hasn't had success, and this might be able to kind of turn the corner for him, what would your advice be?
Just one, huh?
Just your one main one. If you had to pick one. I mean, we all know there's a bunch of them, but just like one piece of advice that, over the years has maybe helped you or, may help them.
Yeah. Well, I feel like what I see a lot of beginners, the mistake that they make is, I'm not going to go into calling. I'm going to keep it even simpler than that, is like movement. People just don't seem to understand how good the turkey's eyesight is and then how little they will put up with when they catch micro movement. They might not know exactly what they saw, but they're like, man, there was a leaf that moved the wrong way over there in those bushes, and I'm just not 100% sure, so I'm not messing with it, and I'm not going to even run away. I'm just going to kind of just veer and slowly feed away. And when that stuff happens, you might be like, oh man, my decoy setup was wrong. If you're like a beginner hunter, I can almost guarantee you that no, it was because you thought that you could move your head 3 or 4 inches and look out of the corner of your eye because you had to look at the turkey because and he caught the bill of your hat moving, or he caught your ghillie, head net, moving a little bit, your gun barrel moving a little bit, whatever it is. But like, they just won't put up with it.
Yep.
You've got to the only time I move on a turkey is if I am 100% sure that turkey's head went behind something that they cannot see through.
Yep.
And if it's like a bush, I'm probably not going to move because I feel like they're going to see through the bush. But if it's like a solid tree trunk or a bale of hay or maybe even a fence post, like you have a half a second where you can just adjust your gun 2 inches, 3 inches, whatever it might be, or adjust your butt because it's falling asleep. But like, yeah, man, just you gotta sit so still and literally let them walk in front of your gun barrel versus
and
trying to swing on them.
They're so quick. That's what I was gonna say. Like, the movement of guns even need to be like, sloth like. We've thought like, oh, he's in range. Like, I'm gonna move my gun from my knee now and point, put the bead on him. And that, that half a second it took me to get from on my knee to maybe 20 degrees, he's gone and I can't get back on him. It's just like so quick. They see so well.
He puts 10 yards on you, and all of a sudden, you went from having like a maybe okay shot to now it's very marginal.
Yep. Yeah. If you think you're moving slow enough, move just a little bit slower or not at all. It's like even head turns. Hunting with Chris Parrish, who's did it forever. Like, it might take him a minute to look from his right to his left. Maybe he'll move his eyes, but then his his head turns on his neck, just like extremely slow. Just making sure if there's birds close that no fast movement. Well, good luck to you this year, Giannis, on all of your spring turkey hunts. I really appreciate taking the time to be on the podcast today. And
thanks for having me on. You got me all fired up now, man. I'm gonna go home and bust out a pot call and start clucking away at my pet turkeys and up in my my language game.
Perfect. Have a good one, Giannis.
Thanks.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. Simply pour a can in your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.